Moriden Athluan. Historians still seek to find out more about the mer whose actions ended the Fourth Era. Many are the tales that have been told of him, and most of them seem to contradict each other.
Most know him as the fabled Dragonborn of the Fourth Era, the savior of all Nirn, the mer who restored the lost dragon blood of the Septim line of emperors to all Mandus.
Some insist that he was a cunning thief. More insist that he was a warrior without compare. Still, others argue that he was a mage of unrivaled power.
There are whispers that he was the slave to the Daedric lords. Some even claim, in tales told in the darkest corners of Skyrim, that he was a vampire lord.
Like all legends, there are bits of truth hiding among the embellishments and the exaggerations. No single telling of the legend matches any others. But there are some few things that are always the same. The truth, however, the truth is not what the bards would have you believe. "22 Last Seed, 4th Era, 201. Dawn found me on the road, just past Morthal, shivering, and trying to keep enough feeling in my feet to keep them moving. I cut well south of the road outside of Dawnstar, going cross-country and avoiding the Pale Border Station, where either new guards will have taken over, or the bloody remains of my victims yesterday are still cooling in the snows. I did not wish to risk the former. I was not quite sure that I could face the latter. The sun coming up does give me some warmth, but I know that if I don't either make a fire myself, or the weather gets warmer, I may be in some trouble soon. Once I am past the falls, I dare not stop until I get near to Dragon's Bridge. Those necromancers are still in that fort, and I am not sure I could draw my bow well enough to survive such an encounter. With nearly nothing left, I entered the city just after noon, and was in the presence of the general not long afterwards. I handed the crown to him, along with a quick, verbal report. To his credit, he admitted that he hadn't acted on the legate's information as soon as he should have. That may have cost us several good men. But the crown is in his hands now, and I could almost feel the gravity of the room increase, and he considered for a few moments, then nodded to himself. I was given my orders. In the morning I am to depart Solitude, bound for Whiterun. The general now has reliable information that says that Stormcloak is finally ready to start the war in earnest. All he is waiting for, it would seem, is to know where Whiterun and, more to the point, Jarl Balgruf's loyalties lie. The Jarl has to this point resisted declaring for either side. Ulfric is now ready to demand an answer, and back it up with military force if the Jarl tries to dissemble. On arrival, I am to hand this intelligence to the Jarl and the Jarl only. From there, I will act as the Jarl's messenger as needed. The war, it seems, is about to start in truth, but it can wait until I get some sleep. After over 36 hours on my feet and several skirmishes in that time, I've got nothing left. The price of a room at the Skiva suddenly doesn't seem so daunting. I trudged to the Skiva. I didn't utter a single complaint as I was fleeced once again for a room. I even paid a little extra to get a bath in, a luxury I am not used to having. Now able to pass by the others in the city without drawing plugged noses and comments about skunks nearby, I climbed the stairways back up to my room and passed out nearly before I had even settled in the bed. 23 Last Seed, 4th Era, 201. I traded yesterday's snowfall for torrential rain. The trip was made all the more miserable for it. Not only was it still near freezing, despite the time of year, but the wind and rain made it bone-chilling in a way that mere snow somehow didn't create. I hate the cold. We've never gotten along. On the other hand, the rain did allow me to skirt the walls of a massive fortress ruin on the road to Rorikstead, larger, it seemed, than either of the fortress ruins I had been in to this point. That could, of course, just be the rain and lighting making it look more menacing than it actually was, but I would be lying to myself if I didn't say I was grateful to cross the river and put that place behind me. I stopped at the Frostfruit Inn at Rorikstead at what I think was noon, or at least close to it. The clouds had only gotten thicker through the day, the light even grayer, so it was hard to say for certain. What was certain was how cold and wet I was, and I have to admit I gave serious thought to giving a room and trying to wait out the storm rather than press on. The message in my pouch, though. It could be the beginning of the war, could possibly prevent Ulfric from getting in the first victory. I could not allow that to happen, not if I had the power to prevent it. So it was that I stayed only long enough to dry out somewhat and warm myself, then ventured back into the rain. It would seem the Stormcloaks know what the Legion is up to. I was ambushed at a major crossroads by a full patrol of Stormcloak soldiers, and had it not been for a saber cat, I likely would never have survived. It was the cat's scream that alerted me to their presence. By the time I realized what was happening, the cat had already killed one of them, and now that I was alerted, I was able to kill several more. But that doesn't mean it was an ambush, right? I would have agreed had they not shouted some things that indicated they knew I was coming, and where I was going. There may be a spy at Castle Dower. I'll have to make sure the General, or at least the Legate, know about that when I get a chance to talk to them again. 2 more ambushes awaited me, but forewarned that they might be present, I was more cautious as I proceeded. I was able to spot them early and use the distance to my advantage, which also allowed me to continue honing my skills with the bow. As night began to fall, the rain finally let up, and I got my first sight of Whiterun. I'd heard of it, of course. The center of trade for the whole province. Even from a distance, I could tell that it was better maintained, better cared for, than the hole in the ground that is Windhelm. I hope that its Jarl cares for his people as much as this first glimpse of his city would indicate. I would not be wanting to assault those solid-looking walls if it came to it. I reached the gates some 2 hours after sundown, and I must admit that the guards' attention to their duty was impressive. They weren't planning on letting me in at all originally. A strange dunmer in battered Legion armor appearing after dark? I can understand their caution. The general seal on the writ I was carrying, however, convinced them that I had good reason to enter. I was directed to report directly to the Jarl's home, Dragon's Reach. It might be late, but it appears that I am now expected. I may have been expected, but the general, as important a busybody as he is in Skyrim, is currently playing second place to some other situation. If everyone in the council hadn't been treating it seriously, I would believe the story I heard to be some kind of madness, a rumor passed on by some crazy person, and changed so much in the transitions and translations that it had lost all resemblance to the original story. But since they are taking it seriously, and it's getting in the way of me completing my own mission, I suppose I have no choice but to take it seriously as well. The rumor, if it is to be believed, is dragons. Supposedly one has been sighted in southern Whiterun near a fort town called Helgen. Fine. If they need some kind of confirmation, then I will run out to Helgen, and once I have seen that everything is fine and that this dragon thing is a complete sham of some kind, I will return here, let them know, and get on with the important business of killing Ulfric Stormcloak. The business of the war. 24 Last Seed, 4th Era, 201. I left the city at daybreak, hoping to make the trek to Riverwood, a small village along the way, and then to Helgen, where I planned to spend the evening laughing at all the people in Whiterun who thought there were dragons here. It is quite simply ridiculous. Dragons were hunted to extinction by the Blades centuries ago, before they became the personal guards of the Septim line. The idea that they might have survived, that it took this long for one to be seen? It's ludicrous in the extreme. And yet, here I am, on a quick journey to prove the fairy tale is just that. What a waste of time. Riverwood is a pleasant little hamlet in the mountain pass, just downriver from Lake Ilinolta. A sleepy little town that it looks like most people generally don't stick around in. I certainly fell into that category, only staying long enough to get the directions I would need to get to Helgen. Of the two paths, I'm planning to take the more direct route, though it is also the steeper one. No reason to waste more time on this trip than I need to, I think. It would seem that I am the one who will end up seeming idiotic. Helgen looked peaceful enough from the approach, but as I drew near the gates, it was clear that all was not right. The bodies, burnt and very obviously dead, were my first clue, and the looters that descended on me as soon as I opened the gates were the next. The true tale here, though, is one I would not believe if the evidence for it were not before me. A journal entry gave me the information I needed, as unbelievable as it is, given how the physical evidence matches what the journal tells. I have little choice, for now, but to take it as truth. Ulfric Stormcloak was captured a day or so after I left Windhelm. Unfortunately, yesterday, as I was crossing to Whiterun, the Legion brought Stormcloak here to Helgen, where General Tullius met up with the capturing force. And, as they were about to execute the man, the unthinkable happened. A dragon did, indeed, appear in the skies over Helgen, and it set fire to the whole city. What few survivors there were fled the city with no indication of where they were going. Likely, anywhere but here. The note indicates that some survivors might be in the keep, so that is where I will look. If I can get an eyewitness to the attack, my own tale will be more credible. The keep held everything I was afraid I would find. Both Stormcloak and Imperial bodies obviously killed in fighting between themselves, as well as looters trying to take anything of any kind of value. Were this all I found, I'd be inclined to think that the war was kicking off here in Helgen instead of in Whiterun, like the General had expected. But I can't think of anything that can hurl a piece of masonry as large as what I found straight through the keep walls and cause a cave-in 30 feet below ground. And that had clearly happened. Without seeing the beast, I am as sure as I can be. When I am certain that there are no survivors of the attack itself to be found, I will pass back through Riverwood, both to ask about any sightings there and to give warning. There are still places to search, however, and I can't bring myself to leave, if there's even a chance someone is still alive. Bandits of various stripes seem to be about the only thing that is alive down here. The last of the Imperial or Stormcloak bodies were back in an Imperial torture chamber. That doesn't sit well with me, I do not hesitate to add. And all I've seen since is looters. This cave system I stumbled into, however, the one mentioned in that journal back in the keep itself, it is clearly far, far older than the keep was. Unless bodies have decayed to bone in record time, which I seriously doubt. After killing a bear, which has been a terror for some time, judging from all the gnawed-on skeletons around its den, I emerged back into the Skyrim night. Any survivors would have come this way, and likely have already long since departed. Even so, I'll be making for Riverwood to begin spreading the word. That village, at least, should be warned that the rumors appear to be true. Tomorrow I will make for Whiterun again and deliver the news there as well. I'm not sure how this will affect my original mission, but I will figure that out when I get there. Being a dunmer raised, if you want to call it that, in a city full of Nord storytellers, you hear a lot of the supposed history of the Nords. One of the stories, not often told, but enough so that I have heard about them enough to recognize them, is that of the Mundus stones, more commonly called the Standing Stones. Supposedly dotting the landscape of Skyrim, there are 13 of them, one for every birth sign, and each one providing supposedly mystic powers to those who can use them properly. I never put much stock in the story portion of it. The stones I was sure existed, but there was nothing mystical about them, just some story told around the campfire to get the Nord blood stirring. I may have to revise that opinion as well, as I've just now found 3 of them. The warrior, the mage, and the thief, all next to each other. The thing is, when I drew close to them, they reacted somehow. Not like the glow of the spirit walk, more like some kind of vibration, a resonance between my body and these rocks. I touched the thief, and a great shaft of light descended out of the sky and touched the top of the stone. After a moment, it faded, and I'm not sure anything else happened, but now I have to wonder how much of those old stories were actually true. I left the stones hoping I would make Riverwood before midnight, but also all but certain that I wouldn't. If I were able to find a campsite I felt safe in, I might just set up for the night and continue in the morning, but I'm not sure I'm comfortable this close to the river. Its noise masks too many other noises I might need to hear to survive. 25 Last Seed, 4th Era, 201. I reached the village just after midnight, not as soon as I would have preferred, but not as late as I had feared. The innkeep, a rather dour woman by the name of Delphine, was still up. She was gruff, but the price was decent, and the bed still far better than most I've slept in over the last many years. so I didn't comment about it too much. Besides, there is a look to her that tells me that complaints wouldn't get much out of her. She actually reminds me of some of the soldiers I've met and worked with these last few days, actually. There's a hardness there. I wonder if she is a Legion veteran, perhaps. Not that I'm going to ask. If she is, then with what I saw, it's likely not something she likes to talk about. A survivor of the Great War, perhaps, which would explain a lot, really. The skies were pouring rain as I stepped out of the inn and spoke briefly to the smith before I departed for Whiterun. He will be able to spread the word. If he believes me, anyhow. It is the best I can do, so I'll just have to trust that things will fall out as they should. Ascending the stairway back to Dragon's Reach, I begin to understand the position that Jarl Balgruuf has been trying to maintain. At first I was shocked, but the longer I thought about it, the more sense it made to me, though it will regrettably not be a position he can maintain much longer. This was all revealed to me through a simple observation. At the foot of the stairs was a massive shrine to Talos. I have no care for him either way, but for the Nords, he basically holds the same position as our own Azira did for my ancestors. He is also supposedly one of the reasons for the Great War and the Thalmor occupation of the Empire. By treaty, his worship is flat banned, which doesn't sit right with the province at large. And yet, here this priest is not only openly worshipping Talos, but doing so loudly. The message from the Jarl is clear. Worship as you believe you must. For that to work, however, the Jarl cannot allow the Empire to station troops or otherwise look like he represents the Empire. And so he walks the line between the two factions in the war. I can respect it. When Ulfric and General Tullius push, though, he will have to make a decision. And the one he makes may well prevent this priest from preaching openly in the city afterwards. Again, I approached Jarl Balgruuf, this time with the information I gained from my exploration of Helgen. His face was grim the entire time, even more so when I included the information that Ulfric had been at Helgen as well, moments from execution. The Jarl's eyes traveled upward, towards the ceiling of his keep, and I could not help but follow his gaze. If I had been paying closer attention, I wouldn't have missed the giant skeleton, the giant winged skeleton that was hanging from the roof. Dragons were real. My lack of belief had not changed that reality. They were back, or at least one was back, and it had already destroyed a major fortified city. I sent a letter to Solitude, to the General with my findings. Given what I found at Helgen, he'll already know. Since Balgruuf seems to be unwilling to address the potential war situation until he has a better feel for this dragon and its implication, I've also requested to place myself at the Jarl's disposal until the court wizard Farengar has a solid lead to look into. Ah, yes. The court wizard. His tone made it clear that it would be hate at first sight. Fortunately, though it's him I have to wait on to get some proper direction on this whole dragon thing, he doesn't have any information at the moment, though he claims he has a source he can check with. A few days, he says, and we'll have something usable, which means that until the General writes back, I am at my own disposal. I have therefore decided that if I can make a good general impression of the Legion while I am here, that can only help the cause. To that end, I will be looking for minor things around the city to keep myself busy doing, while at the same time helping the citizenry out. This is, after all, the proper role of the legions, is it not? It did not take long for me to find a minor task, and while it may seem to be a nothing, a squabble between children, I don't care much for bullying in any of its forms. A young man being bullied by a young girl. I'm sure they'll work it out in the future, but for now, she's coming down on him far harder than she should be. I'll be having a small talk with the girl, set her straight. Okay, fine, yes. It's a petty thing, but you have to start somewhere. With the young lady straightened out, she apparently only wants a kiss from the young man. I see a turbulent relationship in the next few years. I found myself near the city's Hall of the Dead. I was never allowed near the Windhelm Hall. They were afraid I would loot their dead or some such, I imagine. I took the opportunity to look around and satisfy a little curiosity. The priest got my attention, though, and after a moment, asked for my help. One of his duties, it seems, is to use the powers of Arcade to keep the dead from getting restless, and his primary tool to do that is his amulet, which, of course, he has accidentally misplaced, likely in the catacombs themselves, where the dead are now getting restless. I have so many questions here, but a quick few minutes and I can both see the interior of the hall, which I've never been able to do, and help out a local citizen, making an even better impression of the Legion with the people. Not a hard choice to make, I think. The priest was right to be concerned. Several of the dead had, in fact, started taking a little stroll. They were none too happy to see me, either. The halls were not all that extensive, so it was a bit challenging to maneuver while I flamed them into submission, but they were clearly not as deadly as the ones I saw in Corvinland a few days ago. I found the amulet with little trouble, and returned it to the priest in short order, with one of the more important of the priesthood in Whiterun now inclined to look with favor upon the legions at large, and me specifically. It is time to see how the city thinks of the legions in general. That means checking the rumor mills, and if there is one place all such rumors will hit, it is the inn. I made my way towards the Bannered Mare to get a room for the night, speak to the people, and determine how best I could serve the locals.